hurtled downward into the darkness. He landed hard on a rock floor, tumbling end over end. When he came to rest, he was in another chamber, wide and empty. Blazing torches threw patches of light around, casting bizarre shadows. For the first time in a while, Ryu had a chance to think. He had to get back to the Jaquio. With both statues, the evil creature would surely take over the world. Ryu's head was jangling with questions. Who was the red-haired girl? Was she really a CIA agent? Or was she in cahoots with the Jaquio? Maybe she was a double agent. But for whom? Was she telling the truth? Was anybody telling the truth? Ryu didn't have time to find any answers. A spark shot out of the wall next to him. He dove away. A familiar object clattered to the ground. A shuriken. Across the room, where no one had been standing a moment ago, there was a hulking figure. His face was covered by a death mask, and sharp spikes protruded from his uniform at the shoulders and wrists. "Hey, don't worry, man," he said in a raspy voice with a thick New York accent. "I wouldn't do nothing to you while you wasn't looking. I wait till people look at me in the eye before I kill them." "Nice of you," Ryu said dryly. "Hey, don't mention it," the man said. "When Bomberhead wants to kill, he kills clean." With that, Bomberhead began swinging his right arm around. His fingers were gripping the end of a powerful chain. On the other end was a long two-headed sickle. Ryu's mind raced. Using chi power would be too risky. Bomberhead must have been a master of chi power himself. He had prevented Ryu from seeing him at first. The sickle swung wildly in a circle. Any second now, Bomberhead would let loose. Anger welled up inside of Ryu. He was failing. He had let down Dr. Smith, the CIA was using him, his life was in danger, and he hadn't come close to finding out anything about his father. Ryu was desperate. It was time for the art of the fire wheel. Never had Ryu attempted this dangerous special form. He had learned it at the end of a training session. A session in which he had gotten so furious that steam had begun to rise around him. "Use your anger," his instructor had said. "Turn it into a weapon." He had shown Ryu how, and the results were so powerful, Ryu vowed to never try it unless he had no other choice. Now, he had no other choice. He let his rage rise to a fever pitch. He felt his skin begin to turn hot. Then came the smoke. Bomberhead's eyes were growing wide with confusion. He swung the chain and sickle faster, preparing for a mighty throw. Was it going to work? Or would it only be smoke? Ryu thought about his dad, about the senseless death he must have suffered. Whoosh! There it was, the fire. It surrounded Ryu's body, turned him into a human ball of flames. Bomberhead's swing faltered. He stood staring, slack-jawed. With a dull thunk, the sickle fell to the ground. Ryu stepped forward. The flames leapt from his body. They encased Bomberhead. There was a burst of light like a supernova. In the next instant, Bomberhead was gone. The flames flickered and then died. Ryu collapsed to the ground in pain. He wasn't used to the art of the fire wheel. He hoped he would never have to get used to it. It had worked, but he felt completely sapped of energy. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a door at the other end of the room. Maybe it led back to the Jaquio. He struggled to his feet and dragged him across the cavern. Bats squeaked above him as if laughing. He knew his strength would return. It would just take a little time. And during that time, he might as well be moving. As long as he didn't run into someone like Bomberhead. He grabbed the knob and yanked the door open. "Ah!" An involuntary cry escaped from Ryu's throat. There was someone in the doorway. Someone huge. Someone with a sharp butterfly knife in each hand, and a bloodthirsty grin on his face. "I understand you defeated my friends, Barbarian and Bomberhead," the fearsome creature said, raising his knives. "Welcome, my friend, to the Major Leagues." "Who are you?" Ryu asked. He was weak. He had to stall for time. "I am called Massacre, the third of Jaquio's bosses." "How many of you are there?" Ryu groaned. Massacre laughed. "4, but that does not matter. You will not get past me, I assure you. No one ever has." With that, Massacre casually tossed one of the knives. With incredible precision, it flew toward Ryu's dragon sword. The knife blade missed his hand by millimeters. Its shank caught on the sword handle, tearing the sword away from Ryu. He watched helplessly as his weapon clanked to the floor near an ancient, abandoned hourglass. "Get it," Massacre said. "Get the sword and bring it to me. And don't try anything funny because you know what I can do." Ryu turned to the sword. His defenses were down. He felt too weak to use chi power and didn't dare use the art of the fire wheel again. He bent to pick up the sword. He could see its tip mirrored in the smooth surface of the hourglass. Suddenly, he knew what to do. It was a crazy thought, almost a hallucination. Ryu almost ignored it. But his instructor Akira had always told him, the spirit of a ninja runs deep, ready to refresh the thirsting soul. Now as before, Ryu knew to trust his instinct. The hourglass. He had to touch the hourglass with the dragon sword. His fingers gripped the sword handle. As he stood up, he brought the tip close to the glass surface. "Hurry up!" Massacre commanded. "I have no time for zap!" There was a flash of blue light. Massacre stood in the doorway, frozen in mid-sentence. Ryu wondered what he was staring at. Then he noticed that all sounds had stopped. No whoosh of wind currents, no squeaking of bats. He looked up. There were bats, 3 of them. They were suspended in mid-air, as if by strings. What had happened? Ryu glanced at the hourglass again, and it suddenly came to him. Time was standing still. It was allowing Ryu to attack, despite his weakened state. He did. His thrust wasn't as strong as usual, but it didn't need to be. Massacre, the look of impatience still locked onto his face, disintegrated without a fight. Around him, the bats began to squeak again. A droplet of lime water had been hanging in mid-fall, now splashed onto a stalagmite. Ryu went through the door. It led to some sort of tunnel. Actually, a pipe was a better description. Judging from the smell, it was once part of a sewer that had fallen into disuse. It was plenty wide for a human to walk upright, but it was lit only by the weak light through the open door behind him. Ryu walked along, hoping it would lead to the outside. Then he could mount a new attack on the temple, a smarter attack. He felt his strength slowly returning. Ahead of him there was a weak shaft of light coming from the top of the pipe. As he got closer, he saw that the light outlined the shape of a square. Below it was a small ladder. Bingo! It was exactly what Ryu wanted. He climbed up the ladder and pushed against the door. Crank! There were no hinges. Instead, the entire square lifted upward. It was made of heavy stone, and Ryu had to push hard. Light began to stream in, along with the lush, humid smells of the jungle. Clunk! He pushed the stone aside and stuck his head out. He was at the edge of a small clearing. The grass was brown and the dirt hard. Everything had been made dull by the intense sunlight, except for the square stone. Ryu couldn't help notice the gold inlays that sharply reflected the light. There were intricate figurines arranged in some sort of ancient message. Something else caught his eye. Across the clearing there was a larger stone tablet carved with tightly spaced words. He wasn't sure why, but somehow this place seemed familiar. Surely he'd never been here before. He walked closer to the tablet, but a horrible, loud voice made him stop short. "Welcome, my friends, to the home of Bloody Mouth. I'm glad you're here. I've been starved for victims." The words shook the ground. Suddenly, Ryu's sword flew out of its scabbard and into the woods. He turned around, stunned. What he saw was half human, half machine. A cyborg. Its chest muscles seemed sculpted out of metal. There were 3 claws on its feet and a horned mask on its face. It held a sword in its right hand. In its left, it wielded a heavy metal shield as if it were plastic. A shield that displayed the letter J. "J for Jacquio," Ryu said fearlessly. "Is that so you don't lose it?" "A despicable sense of humor. I guess it runs in the family." Ryu's stomach flip-flopped. He felt the blood rush from his head. He knew why the place seemed familiar. The stone, like a tombstone. The clearing, the inscribed tablet. The shield marked with a J. How could he have been so slow to figure it out? No, he hadn't been here before. But his father had. To the last detail, it was the exact place that Dr. Smith had described at the university. The place where Dr. Ken Hayabusa had died. "I know who you are." The words were wrenched out of the deepest part of Ryu's soul. His eyes glared with the pent-up anger of a lifetime. "You killed my father!" Malth's laughter resonated like rifle shots. "Where is your sense of humor now, young Hayabusa? I find this situation extremely funny. In fact, you might say the air crackles with comedy." Thunder sounded in the distance. The warrior slowly raised his arm. "You haven't seen anything yet. Here is something that will electrify you!" Malth cackled at its own joke as a bolt of lightning split the sky, stretching toward the creature's upheld sword. "Electrify!" Malth guffawed like someone who had discovered laughing for the first time. The sound was ugly, awkward. Its abdomen shook. Behind its mask, its eyes were closed. This was Ryu's only chance. He leaped forward. Zzzt! The lightning sparked as it made contact with the tip of Malth's sword. Ryu grabbed its arm. He felt the current surge through him. Malth stopped laughing. The electricity sputtered, then died. Ryu twisted Malth's wrist downward. What the? It began to say, but that was all Malth could get out. With all his strength, Ryu turned the sword and plunged it deep into an unshielded spot near Malth's collarbone. Acrid black smoke billowed from the hole made by the sword. Sparks shot out from Malth's complex inner machinery. From its mouth came a mechanical squawk. It sank to the ground. "Impossible!" Malth said. "This was not programmed!" Ryu leaned over the dying cyborg. It was hard to believe that this malfunctioning hunk of hardware once dealt a death blow to his father. If only he could go into the past and tell his dad about Malth's fatal weakness. "I guess your human side got the better of you," Ryu said softly. He looked away and sighed. Was this what his whole trip had been about? If he had come to America to avenge his father's death, why did the victory feel so empty? Through the slits in the mask, Mouth's eyes glowered at Ryu. You think you've avenged your father's death, don't you? You think that when I'm gone, all will be square. Well, you're wrong. For one thing, I can be constructed again. And as for your father, he is still alive and captive. You lie, Ryu said. You're saying that to get the last word in, to give me false hope, to make me return to the Jacquio. Well, I won't give you the satisfaction, Mouth. I don't believe you. Very well, then. I shall leave you without mentioning another word. I suppose you don't care enough to know where it's being kept. Why should you care? You never met the old man. Besides, he abandoned you. Ryu's temper broke. He stormed up to Mouth and pulled him up by the mask. You can't talk about my father like that! Tell me where this supposed hiding place is. I'll go to it and then defeat the Jacquio. If you've tricked me, it won't matter. You won't be around to gloat! Mouth tried to laugh, but in his weakened state, it was a brittle snicker. Go back through the opening and follow the tunnel when it forks left. At the end, take the pathway made of black stone. In time, you will come upon a room. If you manage to enter, you will see your father. But it will be the last thing you see. With a cough and an electric sputter, Mouth fell silent.